All right, thank you so much, Patricia, and welcome everyone to Safe Havens' 8-webinar series about working with victims and survivors of abuse who are faith-affiliated. This webinar series has looked at why faith is important and issues particular to Christian, Muslim, and Jewish victims. We also looked at what faith looks like from the Latina and African American points of view and important information for helping survivors of clergy abuse. All these webinars are recorded and posted to our website at www.interfaithpartners, with an S at the end, .org. So this is the final webinar in our series. We're a little sad, but we hope to have another series next year. Of course, we recognize that not all victims are faith-affiliated, but for those who are, faith can be an important piece of their identity, decision-making, and healing. And even for victims who are not faith-affiliated, often people in times of crisis refer back to their family's faith traditions or culture to understand things like marriage, gender roles, relationships, and identity. So understanding more about different faiths and about faith-affiliated victims and survivors can help advocates meet the needs of their clients and provide services that are appropriate for each individual client. Like victims, advocates are both faith-affiliated and non-faith-affiliated. And the faith of the advocate might be different or the same as the client, or one of them could be faith-affiliated and one not. So whether faith-affiliated or not, many advocates want to learn more about their clients, and that's what this webinar series is all about. So everyone, whether faith-affiliated themselves or not, is welcome to this webinar. And we are deeply grateful to the Office on Violence Against Women for the opportunity to do this work, and of course to our grant manager, Charlotte Turpin, for her support throughout. She's been fantastic. So just a couple of words about Safe Havens. I'm the director of Safe Havens. I'm Anne-Marie Hunter, and with me today are my colleagues, Allison Morse-Katzman and Shireen Akram-Boshar. We are multi-religious. We just celebrated our 25 years as a nonprofit, and we work both nationally and locally. And we have been Office on Violence Against Women technical assistance provider since 2003, so it's been quite a run. Today's webinar is going to look at older victims of abuse and faith, and this is particularly timely, of course, because World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is on June 15th, and so this is just a couple of days before this, and a wonderful way for all of us to celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So welcome to all of you who have joined us today. I'm really glad you're here. And I guess I already introduced myself, so we'll skip through this one, but this does have our webinar information, or our website information down at the bottom, and our emails and so forth. So feel free to reach out to us, and you'll be hearing from all three of us today.
So today we're going to stand at the crossroads of aging, abuse, and faith, and we're going to take it one piece at a time. So first, let's look at aging. The United States population is getting older. Older adults in our community, considered 65 and older, are numbered at 46.2 million as of 2014, which is the latest year that we have data available. By 2060, there will be about 98 million older people, more than twice that number from 2014. People 65 and older represented 14.5% of the population in the year 2014, but are expected to grow to be 21.7% of the population by 2040. Think about this. 10,000 baby boomers are turning 65 every day. So if you're not working with or serving older adults now, you may well be in the future.
We'd all like to think that we'll be happy and healthy as we age. And there are many older adults who are enjoying their later years and are healthy and feel taken care of. And of course, we all want to be part of this group. But when we look at older adults and the long-term effects of racism, ageism, class inequality, sexism, and other forms of discrimination, a more ominous picture appears. 6.6% of all men over 65 are living in poverty. That's bad enough, but statistics show that African American men are at 15.7% and Hispanic men at 14.4%. That's a significant slice of older Americans who are struggling to make ends meet. The picture for women is even more troubling. 10.7% of older women overall are impoverished, but more than 21% of both Black and Hispanic women are living below the poverty line. This is a result of a lifetime of lower wages, of taking time off to raise children, of lesser education, and since women live longer, of making retirement savings stretch over many more years. Aging is complex. From 60 to 105 is 45 years. A lot happens during that time. An adult could be 60 and are already suffering from chronic diseases and struggling physically. Or they could be physically sound but experiencing the first creeping symptoms of dementia. Or they could be 87 and out every day riding their bike. At the same time, older adults are racially, ethnically, and in every other way diverse, and becoming more diverse by the day. The sea change in society's attitudes towards the LGBT community means that gay and lesbian couples are trying to figure out how to negotiate nursing homes and other institutions, and transgender adults are encountering assisted living institutions. There may be health complications, ongoing transitions, increasing vulnerability, dementia and capacity issues, and physical disabilities. In addition, by the time we reach 60, many of us, and particularly those of us who are women, have suffered layer upon layer of trauma. Now, what we mean by layers of trauma is that many people who are older have experienced historical trauma and oppression of some kind, and often several kinds. Older adults have been living at the intersection of gender, race, immigration status, sexual orientation, and gender identity for many years. In working with older victims, it's important to remember these layers and intersections of trauma. And last but certainly not least, older adults are significantly faith-affiliated and religiously and spiritually diverse. 86% of adults born before 1964, so that's the baby boomers and silent generation, are faith-affiliated. Spiritual needs often change with age. The world looks different at 75 than it did at 25. Older adults are seeking meaning, building their legacy, and often making deeper connections than ever before. It's a rich time of both meaningful gains and manifold losses.
We've included a quick summary of abuse of older adults just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I want to preface this by saying that Safe Havens is a faith-based nonprofit. We're not elder abuse experts or adult protective services or advocates, and we're going to refer you to some real expert agencies at the end of this webinar. But we wanted to talk just a little bit about what this is all about. It's important for us to have this conversation today because we really need everyone, advocates and faith leaders, adult protective services and area agencies on aging and law enforcement and prosecutors and bankers and lawyers and friends and neighbors, all of us, to get involved and to work together to end elder abuse. Everyone has a significant and unique role to play. Elder abuse isn't new, but talking about elder abuse is. In 2014, there was a study of 750 stakeholders in the field, and the research was written up by Risa Breckman, M.T. Conley, and Bonnie Brandel, and their mission was to understand, prevent, identify, or respond to elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation. They asked that question of these stakeholders: what would we need to do that? What would we need to understand, prevent, identify, or respond to elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation? And the result is the Elder Justice Roadmap, which I recommend to all of you. It became very clear in talking to these stakeholders that elder abuse is a pressing and critical social crisis. And it's a social crisis not only because America is aging, but also because older adults are not always getting the help that they need. So before we talk about what elder abuse is, let's talk for a minute about what it is not, or at least what we're not going to be able to cover today. Older adults can be harmed in a number of ways that are important to know about but are not necessarily abuse. For example, older adults may be injured by falls or other mishaps. In other cases, caregivers are doing their best but do not know how or physically cannot support an older adult. For example, an adult child who has a developmental disability may not be able to care for aging parents. Or a 90-pound woman may not be able to properly move her 250-pound bed-bound husband. In these cases, the caregiver may not have the intent to harm the older individual. Another example of how some older adults may be harmed is that some people have medical conditions that are organic, such as Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia or brain trauma or other illnesses that might result in challenging, aggressive behavior that cannot be controlled. In these cases, which are the exception and not the norm, the person is unable to control his or her behavior due to an illness or the effects of medications. So this is the Elder Justice Roadmap definition of elder abuse. The most important part of this definition is the point about the expectation of trust between the older individual and the perpetrator of the abuse. And for those of you who are advocates in fields such as domestic violence, you'll see that how this point of trust, the fact that you expect to be able to trust someone, can pull people into a relationship that's very similar to that of intimate partner violence. So I wanted to talk about these hallmarks of elder abuse, and you'll see, again, that there are familiarities for those of you who are working in the domestic violence field. First of all, power and control is a hallmark of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the domestic and sexual violence movement for helping us all understand that the root of abuse is in the perpetrator's desire to establish power over others, even others they say they love. When abuse is present, the victim is controlled by the abuser. The victim may not be able to buy milk, drive the car, spend money, change the channel, or go to the bathroom without permission. And the victim's life is constrained by the need to do what the abuser dictates and to avoid doing anything the abuser does not approve. So as in domestic violence, victims talk about walking on eggshells, and that's pretty much how it feels. The abuser establishes power and control over the victim over time through a pattern of manipulation and coercion. Victimization is a process that uses all kinds of tactics, including sexual, physical, verbal, spiritual, financial, and psychological abuse, isolation, intimidation, threats, stalking, neglect, and so on. In the hands of an abuser, pretty much anything can be a weapon. So it could be the car, the house, the insurance, the money, the credit card, the retirement accounts, family or faith community or faith leader, or the desk scissors, or your sexual orientation, or your immigration status. It could be bare hands. It could be anything and everything in the hands of an abuser could be a weapon. And as many of you who work with victims of domestic violence understand all too well, abuse affects men and women of all races, faith, education, and income levels, professions, sexual orientations, physical and cognitive abilities, countries of origin, immigration statuses, and so on. With elder abuse, of course, the most obvious difference is the age of the victims and also the age at which abuse becomes elder abuse, which varies by state. Sometimes when domestic and sexual violence advocates talk about abuse of older adults, they actually start at 50 because they report a marked drop-off in people asking for help at about age 45 or 50. But most state laws that determine what an elder is under the elder abuse statute have ages such as 60 or 62 or 65. So there are particularities to elder abuse that make it at times markedly different from other forms of abuse. Older individuals are often more vulnerable, for one thing. They often rely more heavily on a wider level or layer of people to assist them in their everyday life. And this in turn means that within this wider network of people who may be helping or pretending to help, there is the potential for an individual whose trust and assistance is needed to become an abuser. Not necessarily the spouse or romantic partner, as in the case in intimate partner violence.
Tragically, older victims of abuse are not getting the help they need. One study in New York found that only 1 in 23 cases of elder abuse are even reported. This underreporting makes it hard to know how many older adults are being harmed, but a 2009 study of almost 6,000 older adults who were called and asked a series of questions discovered that 1 in 10 said they had been abused in the past year. And think about this study. The participants had to have the economic resources to have a phone, the physical mobility to get on their phone to answer it, and the cognitive capacity to follow the questions. None of the callers lived in facilities such as assisted living or nursing homes, or didn't speak English, or were prevented from answering the phone. So it's likely that this 1 in 10 number is pretty low. Research is also showing that people with dementia are at a much higher risk for abuse. Since 1 in 6 people over 80 already have some form of dementia, abuse of older adults is a significant problem, to say the least. In intimate partner violence, as we've mentioned, abusers are current or former intimate partners. In abuse of older adults, we expand that list significantly. The most common abusers are family members, but add to that caregivers, persons in authority, and many others in the community who an older adult should be able to trust. And the consequences of this abuse are enormous. Physically, there are wounds, fractures, contusions, all kinds of injuries resulting in all kinds of disabilities and dysfunctions. Psychological consequences include depression, fear, guilt, shame, distrust, disempowerment, withdrawal, or post-traumatic stress. Economically, there's a tremendous loss of possessions, financial assets, and other resources. Spiritually, victims report feeling disconnected, broken, hopeless, confused, or violated. They say they've lost their dignity and their humanity, and sometimes their faith. The result is that there are unnecessary hospital visits and unwanted nursing home placements. But there can also be entire families and multiple generations of members who are affected by the abuse of the older adult, even without understanding completely that the older loved one is a victim of abuse. Ultimately, though, this is a life and death issue. Older victims of abuse are 3 times more likely to die prematurely than their non-abused peers. And wherever you find older adults, you will find abuse of older adults. The more vulnerable the adults, the more likely the abuse. The stereotype is that older adults are being abused in nursing homes by paid caregivers. In reality, though, older adults are more likely to be abused in their own homes by members of their own families.
This slide lists some of the red flags that might indicate someone could be a victim. So if you notice any of these red flags in an older individual you're working with, or an older person present in your life in some way, you might want to, if possible, take time to speak with that older adult privately to check in. These are all signs of someone using physical, psychological, financial, or other means of controlling the older adult. And of course, even when an older adult is being abused, you may not hear or see any of these red flags. The next slide is red flags that might indicate that someone is an abuser. Again, even if these indicators are not present, abuse may still be going on. Now that we've gone over a basic definition of elder abuse, let's look more closely at that intersection with faith. We mentioned earlier that older adults are the most faith-affiliated group in the United States. For a member of the silent generation, which is age 68 to 88, 89% of their peers are faith-affiliated. For baby boomers, which are ages 52 to 68, 83% of their peers are faith-affiliated. In the midst of this high level of organized religious affiliation, it's important to remember the complexities. An individual's relationship with organized religion may be painful, risky, stressful, or simply impossible for many reasons. For example, faith communities have often excluded members of the GLBT community or silenced victims and survivors of abuse. Lack of institutional connections does not mean that a person does not have spiritual needs or vibrant and life-affirming spiritual practices. And for many older adults, faith has been an invaluable resource. Older adults are not only faith-affiliated, they are also often deeply engaged in the lives of their congregations. The American Psychological Association found that half of older adults are active in their faith communities weekly. One important thing to remember is that for many older adults, and particularly for older adults who are faith-affiliated, abuse has a significant spiritual impact that can be as important as the physical, sexual, psychological, and financial impacts. As we have talked about in our previous webinars, for survivors who are faith-affiliated, faith can be a barrier to safety, and it can also be a resource. We spoke at length in our Why Faith is Important webinar, that was our first webinar, about how faith can be a resource for victims, and you can access that webinar on our website at www.interfaithpartners.org, but I'll summarize it here. Religion, faith, or spirituality can help victims and survivors stay connected or reconnect. The isolation of abuse can also be compounded by aging. Religion, spirituality, or faith connects victims and survivors of elder abuse to communities and traditions, language and memories, family and culture, history and country of origin, creator, God, greater spirit, higher power, gods. Elder abuse may take away maybe the older person's home or family, neighborhood, freedom, trust, or safety. But faith, religion, or spirituality can provide the structure that helps victims and survivors reorient themselves, find their bearings, and stay centered in their values and identity.
Survivors and victims themselves tell us that they need and want the support and guidance of their faith communities. Given that the abuse they have suffered affects them spiritually, as well as physically and emotionally and in every other way, this makes sense. And faith or spirituality are often connected to healing. In a Canadian study, Elizabeth Podniak found that many older women actually named a specific faith community when they were asked where they would seek help if they experienced abuse. So if you're a service provider and you want to meet older victims where they're at, faith communities and faith community outreach are a good place to start. This is even more the case when speaking about older women of color, and older individuals in minority populations, where faith is often very vibrant and where faith leaders are often trusted and beloved. The fact that these victims and survivors want to reach out to their faith leaders and communities should not be seen as an obstacle or something that should be changed. Faith leaders are actually perfectly socially located to recognize and respond to older adults who are experiencing abuse, because they, I'll say we, I'm a faith leader, see older people in their own context over time. And faith leaders are potentially great allies in this work against elder abuse. Trusted faith community members and leaders, especially those who are supportive of older GLBT adults, are perfectly located to be a listening ear, to see or hear what may be abuse, and to be a bridge to community resources and services. Faith communities represent an invaluable opportunity to reach faith-affiliated older adults with information about elder abuse and available services, and with life-saving support and safety. Our goal going forward is to make sure that faith communities and faith leaders are as big a resource and as little a roadblock as possible for older victims of abuse who are faith-affiliated. So as we've said before, not all survivors identify with a particular faith or tradition, but many survivors need to be heard and affirmed, and all survivors need someone to bear witness to their story, someone to accompany them on the journey towards safety and justice and healing. When faith leaders and faith communities, and anyone in a faith community, get training and resources about abuse, faith can be a more effective resource for older victims who are affiliated with the community. The faith leader may have known the older adult for years and been through other crises together and thus be a trusted confidant. The faith leader may know the family across generations, and a referral from a faith leader is more likely to be trusted and acted upon. Faith leaders can also help congregants access services that they may never even know about without their help. Faith leaders are well placed to recognize abuse and understand the dynamics within their community. We can provide compassionate listening, acknowledgement of the abuse, and spiritual and material support. Vigilant and responsive faith leaders can also intervene earlier, which means the trauma will be lessened and the likelihood that the victim and perpetrator can be successfully helped is increased. Unfortunately, all of that is not always going on, mostly because many faith leaders have not received the training and resources that they need to know how to listen to the experiences of victims. So often, faith leaders have not borne witness to the suffering that is happening under our very noses, and in our busyness and our naivete and our lack of understanding, and sometimes with the very best of intentions, we have often endangered and prolonged the agony of older victims of abuse. As first responders, faith leaders need training and resources as well as partnerships with advocates like many of you on this webinar. I myself led a faith community on the North Shore of Boston for 6 years, and I wanted to tell you about one of my congregants. I'll call her Mary. She was really the grandmother figure in my congregation. Everybody knew her and loved her and had known her for many, many years. And she was no longer able to come to services because our sanctuary was not handicapped accessible. But it didn't really matter because everyone went to visit her in her apartment where she was living independently. Oftentimes, parishioners went to visit regularly. So it was not unusual for me to visit, and I, of course, visited after Mary fell in her apartment and broke her arm. And I did the usual hospital visit with a clergy person where you talk about what has happened and debrief a bit and pray. And it was not until many months later, and certainly not from Mary, I heard this from a family member, that Mary hadn't just fallen and broken her arm in her apartment. What had actually happened was that her grandson, her adult grandson, had broken into her home and asked her for drug money, demanded drug money really, and she turned him down, and when she did, he pushed her, and she fell down and broke her arm. And I did not hear that from Mary. And it was only later, even a few months after that, that I learned that this was not the first time that this grandson had done this and had threatened her and demanded money for drugs. So looking back on it, I realized that I really let Mary down because I didn't know at the time anything about elder abuse. I didn't know where to refer her for services. I didn't know about older adult support groups or anything like that. I just really let her down, and I think that older adults deserve better than that, and so I'm hoping we can build the relationships and partnerships between advocates and faith leaders that would preclude that happening again to another Mary, because I know there are other Marys out there. For me, the light bulb moment came in 2008 when I heard Bonnie Brandel from the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life present on elder abuse, and that's when I thought about Mary's story and realized how much I had missed the ball on that. And so in partnership with Bonnie and the National Clearinghouse, Safe Havens has developed some resources which I hope you will take a look at on our website. We first have resources for advocates, and there you'll find a couple of checklists. Atul Gawande's book about the checklist manifesto had just come out when we did this, and I realized how helpful it can be to just go down a checklist and look at things, remind yourselves of things you need to remember. So we started a checklist for before you even start outreach to faith communities, for some things to think about, like where are the strengths and where are the leader congregations and where are the leader faith leaders, and how do I leverage the faith leaders I do know to connect with those I don't, things like that. So you might find that checklist helpful as you think about maybe setting up some meetings with faith leaders or reaching out to them to try to partner with them on elder abuse. We also put together a first visit checklist just so that you can think about things like, will I have to take my shoes off when I go into the sanctuary, or where should we meet, or what are my questions going to be when I sit down with this faith leader? And that can be kind of helpful to look through. You'll also want to think about things like not setting up meetings, not suggesting to set up meetings on holidays, religious holidays, just some culturally competent things like that in the faith community. We're, for example, celebrating Ramadan now, so you wouldn't want to reach out to a Muslim faith leader and offer to have lunch because it's a month of fasting. So keeping those things in mind, knowing when those special days are and respecting them can be very helpful. And we also put together for service providers an outreach guide, and this is where we have gathered up the wisdom that we had at the time about the outreach that we have been doing for many years here in the Boston area with faith leaders, and just providing for you a list of some of the barriers that you may encounter when you reach out to faith leaders, and then some strategies that we have employed to get around those barriers. So you might want to take a look at that. It's barriers like, sometimes I reach out to a faith leader and the faith leader will say, well, I'm interested in this, but we're talking about homelessness this month or whatever. And just ways to get around those sorts of barriers, like thinking that elder abuse isn't happening, or thinking that it's not important or not happening in the congregation. So the distancing and the minimizing and so forth, you'll find some strategies in the outreach guide to overcome those. We also put together a draft letter that you could use to reach out to some of the faith leaders in your community. It's a Word document, and I should say that all of these resources are available from our website and can be downloaded. And they are available in black and white or colored, and they're free, so please feel free to download them. The draft letter we put into Word format so that you can amend it to reflect your own services, and you can put it on your letterhead and put in your own contact information and so forth. It's just an idea for ways to reach out to faith leaders. We find that face-to-face is probably the best way, at least at first, to build a relationship with a faith leader. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that you send this letter out to many faith leaders all at once, but it can be helpful to take it with you, personalize it, and take it with you when you visit a faith leader for the first time. It kind of gives them some information on paper that may be helpful. And then the last thing we put together is a partnership guide, and this is the result of a summit that we had on elder abuse and faith, where we had service providers, adult protective services, faith leaders, and other experts, researchers, and so forth, all together to talk about what are some of the barriers to partnering around this issue, and what are some of the ways that we're going to get around those barriers. So these resources are all on our website, and I would encourage you to check them out. We also can mail you printed copies, and I must say they're very beautiful in print. So take a look at them, and anything that you would like printed copies, there's also a folder so that it can all be sort of part of a toolkit. And you could take this toolkit to faith leaders, for example, when you're visiting them. So these are the resources for advocates on this list. And then the other resources we put together are resources for you to give to faith leaders, for advocates to give to faith leaders. So we have a bookmark that has just some basic information about elder abuse and some resources. And we're hoping that these bookmarks are put into books of prayers or scripture or song or music, and are kept around for quite some time. And so if someone then encounters someone who needs some help, the resource numbers are right there. The bookmarks don't download as well as everything else because they're printed on thicker paper and they're glossed a bit so that they don't deteriorate. So if you'd like us to send lots of bookmarks, we're happy to do that. Our vision was to get them out, many of them in many congregations, so that lots of people have this at their fingertips. So feel free to call us and ask for bookmarks as well. They're pretty cheap to print, and we're very happy to get them out into faith communities. The other thing we put together for faith leaders is a brochure that's fairly brief, and it's really meant for faith leaders who are just thinking about elder abuse and who are wanting to know just enough that they kind of have a lens that they could see elder abuse if they encounter it. So this is a brochure that talks about some of the red flags that we talked about earlier, just the basic definition of elder abuse and what to look out for, and some of the benchmarks to keep an eye out. So those are resources that can be really helpful for faith leaders. And then we're thinking that once a faith leader has their a consciousness raised about elder abuse, that they may actually encounter someone who's experiencing elder abuse or who has questions. And so for a little bit deeper dive, we put together a booklet that is about how faith communities can respond to elder abuse. It goes into more depth about things like safety planning and red flags, and it also includes a little bit on confidentiality and mandatory reporting. So those are the resources that are really helpful to give to faith leaders. And again, as I said, we have a folder, a beautiful folder that matches all of this. So you could put these resources, the faith community resources, into the folder with the personalized letter and take it with you when you go visit faith leaders for the first time, to introduce yourself and to bring them something that can be helpful. And I just wanted to say a word as well about the watermark that you will see on our resources. I mentioned the Elder Abuse and Faith Summit that we had a few years ago that included faith leaders, experts, adult protective services, everybody we could think of. And we did that, and we also had 3 focus groups across the country, one with victims and survivors, one with faith leaders, and one with advocates. And we, at those meetings, asked everyone, the faith leaders, the advocates, the victims, everyone, what values do you bring to the table? What values would you build on to talk about elder abuse? And you'll see those values, the ones that we all held in common, you'll see those values in a watermark on all of our elder abuse resources. And we think it's pretty important because there are, of course, times when faith leaders and advocates and adult protective services won't be on the same page, but we encourage you to go back to these values that we hold in common in finding ways to build partnerships and so forth. So the website, again, is at www.interfaithpartners.org, and that will be up on your screen in just a minute. So there are additional resources as well. The National Center on Elder Abuse is here for you. The National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, which I just mentioned, that is Bonnie Brandel's agency, and they have fantastic resources on their website and some wonderful pieces that they have collaborated with other agencies on, so they really are doing a fantastic job. And then also the National Adult Protective Services Association, which also has a lot of great resources on their website. So please check that out, check those out, and see what you think. And we will be, of course, always here to answer any questions or to send you additional resources or whatever you need. So I want to pause there and see if there are any questions. Everything's okay, question-wise? I'm just asking. I can't see the chat box from here. Is it good? Okay. We're so delighted to have all of you as participants in our webinar series. All of these webinars have been, and you see them up here on your screen, all of them that we have done. They are all up on our screen except today's, and or on our website. And this one will be up in a couple of days as well. And they are available anytime for viewing, and we really encourage you to take a look and participate in those, even if not live. I think they can still be hugely helpful. We've had some fantastic presenters, and it's been a really great series altogether.
There's one question, how to get the resources that you were just talking about, how to get to them.
Oh, okay. So the resources that I was just talking about are available on the Safe Havens website. And Shireen, if you'll just advance to that next slide, I think it's going to come up. Yeah. So the Safe Havens website is down here at the bottom on the right, www.interfaithpartners.org. And everything is downloadable for free, as I said, in black and white or color. However, if you'd like to have beautiful printed copies, and they truly are beautiful, we wanted to have these resources so nice that people would just be compelled to pick them up and take them. But we are happy to send them, and you can tell us whether you need packets or toolkits specifically for your faith leaders, and then we'll just include the faith leader resources, and you'll have to put in the Word document letter as well if you want to, and your own brochures and all of that. Or, what was I going to say? Or we can send you advocate packets, which includes the faith leader information and resources, as well as the partnership guide, the outreach guide, all the rest of it as well. So we can send you complete advocate and faith leader packets, or we can just send faith leader packets, however you want to do it, and as many as you want of each. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we can separately send lots of extra bookmarks as well. And they're very beautifully printed and a lot of fun.
Just to clarify, if you're going to look for the resources, the elder abuse resources on our website, if you go to our website that's up on the screen and go to across the top, there are tabs across, and I think it says resources, and there's a drop-down menu, and it should say elder abuse resources there. Elder abuse and faith, actually, under our resources. It's the second tab going across the top.
So those are available to you anytime, and if you would like to begin to meet with the faith leaders in your community and talk a little bit about elder abuse, we can certainly send you enough packets to take to them. We're finding that partnerships with faith leaders take a lot of time. I mean, you've heard us say this in the webinar series before. They take a lot of time and real thoughtful approach. And so we would really encourage you to think about maybe some of the faith leaders in your community and how you might connect with them, and just sit down with them to ask, what are you seeing, what are your concerns in the community, maybe give them some resources, and just give them the very basic amount of information, and then hope to be able to continue to build that relationship over time. We're really encouraged by what we see when faith leaders and advocates and service agencies are able to build these relationships. We're seeing a lot of great results. I know that in the past these have not always been great relationships, but we are seeing much more positive movement from the faith leaders recently, and are really happy to see that happening and encourage you to reach out to them. The other thing to remember, too, is that it's very important that you reach out to the breadth of faith communities in your area, not just Christian, but remember that there's a vast faith diversity in the U.S., and try to make your outreach as broad as possible across all the communities that are part of your immediate location. Any other questions?
Yeah, it looks like there was one question from a participant. Has elder abuse been recognized as a national problem or crisis, and who is tackling it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would suggest that elder abuse is behind domestic violence and sexual assault in terms of national recognition and action. And it's a group of folks, including the people that put together the Elder Justice Roadmap, for example, who have really been showing a tremendous amount of leadership on this. So this would be people like Bonnie Brandel at National Clearinghouse, the folks at NCEA, at NAPSA, the National Adult Protective Services Agency. There are many national organizations that have been helpful and leaders. And if you go back to that slide, those were the ones that I would think would be the place to start in terms of finding more information. So we are a bit behind the curve. The Elder Justice Act was passed a number of years ago, a few years ago, but it has not yet been really funded. So we're getting there, but we're not there yet. Many older adults don't really want to talk about abuse, or they don't really know that sort of language or label themselves as a victim of abuse. So there's a lot to overcome in bringing this forward to the community and in trying to solve the problem, building the partnerships that can solve the problem. One of my concerns as I look at what's going on is that I think that there are gaps, and many older adults are falling through those gaps. My story about Mary is a really good example of those gaps where various sections of the community don't really know what they need to know to be effective. So it's really important that we all work together in order to bring this to the forefront and raise consciousness about it and try to build the partnerships that will allow us all within our communities to respond effectively. I pastored, I'm a United Methodist pastor, this is Anne Marie speaking, and I pastored for 6 years on the North Shore of Boston, and it was a small congregation, and yet looking back on it, I realized that there were several cases that involved elder abuse that I wish I had known more about elder abuse before I got into that parish, because I could have been much more helpful. I still look back at that and feel very sad about the opportunities missed, but I also know that we're all learning more and moving forward and doing the best as we can. Doing the best that we can as we learn more and become more committed to this issue. So does that answer the question sort of, Shireen? Do you want to add to that at all? No? Okay. Any other questions?
I guess we'll give a couple minutes if people want to type their questions in the chat box.
Okay. I was just going to say, too, that we really are just starting on these relationships between advocates and adult protective services and faith leaders. And I know that we won't be a linear, straight upward line, but the idea is to nudge the conversation a bit, inch by inch, day by day, to where we can get into the same place that that domestic violence and sexual assault and child abuse and so forth are, where they're better known in the community. And the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day that's happening this week on June 15th is a part of that. It's an attempt to establish a day, and some people are even speaking of having it World Elder Abuse Awareness Month, but having a time to really raise the level of awareness and bring this to the forefront, because it is so silenced. So
I guess one thing is, would you like to talk about the movie Gen Silent as a potential, I don't know,
oh, I could,
yeah.
We talked earlier about how many older adults who are members of the GLBTQ community are encountering some of these institutions. You know, as baby boomers get older, they encounter new institutions, and sometimes those institutions have not in the past been responsive to the needs of the GLBT community, or the GLBT community has been so under wraps that these institutions have not been pushed to be more responsive. So I really was encouraging, we were talking earlier amongst the three of us about a film called Gen Silent, which many of you may have seen, but it will really give you a good sense of the varying needs as people age, and how important it is to be able to speak to all parts of a person, and how important it is for all of our institutions in our communities to be able to respond to older adults. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that film if you can. We found it very helpful and informative, and really gives us all a good sense of what we're up against in responding to elder abuse. And one of the things that makes this complicated is the capacity issues among older adults. So that's an added wrinkle that we don't often encounter with younger victims and survivors. And then there's also the added vulnerabilities. It's easier to confine someone if all you have to do is put their crutches or their cane or their walker across the room, or even if you just have to hide their dentures and then you know that they won't go out of the house without their dentures, or there's all kinds of ways of controlling people, and those ways become more numerous and more effective as we age and become more vulnerable. So, and it's also important, too, to remember that both men and women age and become more vulnerable. So it's hard to tell, but it looks to me like we may be seeing more older men who are abused than younger men who are abused. So that's another important facet of the complicatedness of this as well. So I think that's about all I had to say. Are there other questions? Anything else?
Nothing in the chat box, but.
Okay. Well, great. Maybe we've answered all questions. That would be awesome. There's so much to learn. I mentioned earlier my light bulb moment, and I would really encourage you to have your own light bulb moments. But it's not like a one-shot deal. It's been, for me anyway, a very long learning curve. We started this in 2008, talking about elder abuse, and here we are in 2017, and I still am learning every day something new. And at the same time, the field is moving forward, and there's new research and so forth, and so there's always something new to learn. But I keep saying to folks, we have to start somewhere, and the faster we start, the faster we'll get there, and I think going together is the better way than going separately. So we're so happy to have you in partnership on this, and we really appreciate your thoughtfulness about it. Any concerns or questions that you have, we'd love to hear them. We are, as I said, learning ourselves, so we'd be very, very happy to hear from any of you at any point. So you can call us, you can write us, our contact information is here, you can email us. We're very, very happy to hear from you. Is that about it, I think? Yeah? Okay. I want to thank you all so much for participating. It was really, really wonderful, and many of you have participated in all of the PowerPoints in the series, and we're kind of sad to see it go, but this would be the last one. These will all be up on our website. Please help yourself and call us if there's anything that we can do in terms of technical assistance or mailing out resources or any of that. We are more than happy to be helpful, so please reach out, and we'd love to hear from you.